Yes. I was I tried 30 minutes before all this stuff. It was not even a good time. So I was like the closest. Yeah. So like recognize that I didn't have to say anything except like give it. So I just typed. So I was like, yeah. And I read
Oh, sorry.
Alright. We'll get started in a moment. Thank you very much for joining. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Seems like we run out of seats for those in the back. Sincere apologies. But we'll get started now. Good afternoon. So my name is John Fester, and I serve as the Director of Human Relations for the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, or IAYSP. On behalf of the organization, it is my honor to welcome you all to this very timely and important side event. Sexual harassment as a barrier to achieving the SDGs. This event is co-hosted by the Global Forum on Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent, the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, and Women's Federation for World Peace International. IAYSP is built on the belief that youth are essential partners in building sustainable peace and development, not just in the future, but right now. We work across borders to nurture values-based leadership where young people are empowered, but to serve their communities with integrity, empathy, and purpose. But we also recognize that leadership cannot flourish in unsafe spaces. One of our flagship programs, Peace Designer, encourages youth to engage in meaningful activities in a safe space. The core principles of the program are integrity, authenticity, and empathy. The theme of this year's HLPF, that's the High Level Political Forum, calls on all of us to advance sustainable, inclusive, and science-based, evidence-based solutions to deliver on the 2030 agenda. But how can we talk about inclusion and sustainability if harassment, exploitation, and fear still shape the experiences of so many, especially young women and those in informal and unregulated workspaces? Sexual harassment is not just a personal violation, it's a structural barrier to progress on SDG 5, that's gender equality, SDG 8, that's decent work and economic growth, and SDG 16, my personal favorite one, peace, justice, and strong institutions. If we are to truly leave no one behind, then safety, dignity, and accountability must be non-negotiable. Today's discussion is about shining light on those barriers and sharing bold solutions that are grounded in both lived experience and global policy frameworks. So thank you, each of you, for showing up today as advocates, listeners, learners, and allies. To begin, let's take a moment to watch a short opening video that we hope can set the tone for the conversation ahead. Please turn your attention to the screen. That's our organization. Thank you for that powerful visual reminder of why we're here today. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who has been the driving force behind this event, both in vision and in execution. Nagma Shrestha is not only a passionate peace advocate, but also someone who has used every platform, whether in media, pageantry, or the UN, to champion safety, dignity, and youth leadership. She made history as Miss Universe Nepal 2017 and later led the Miss Universe Nepal organization as its national director from 2020 to 23, empowering countless of young women along the way. Today, she serves as our UN New York representative for the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, and brings both lived experience and a deep commitment to creating safer and more inclusive spaces for youth. Please join me in welcoming my colleague and our speaker moderator for today's session, Nagma Shrestha.
Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, trailblazers, change makers, and advocates. It's so good to see a room filled with bright change makers. So thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, I want to take you back to a moment that has stayed with me. Someone trying to excuse their behavior once said to me, "This is not sexual harassment." That sentence meant to silence, to confuse, to suggest that unless it looked a certain way, it did not count. But let's be clear about what exactly is sexual harassment. According to International Labour Organization ILO, sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advance, request for sexual favor, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. It doesn't need to be repeated. It doesn't need to be physical. It just needs to be unwanted. And yet, across industries and countries, so many experiences get invalidated, normalized, or silenced, simply because they don't fit someone else's definition of serious enough. I've spent much of my professional life in public spaces, from television to international pageants to leadership and youth engagement. And throughout that journey, I have witnessed and experienced forms of harassment that were subtle, excused, and often dismissed. It happened to me too. When I was just 21, someone working in the humanitarian sector groped me. I said no. It ended there, but the discomfort stayed, and so did the silence. Like many others, I thought I moved forward, but I carried that experience quietly. Years later, while serving as the National Director of Miss Universe Nepal, I received a serious complaint within the organization about sexual harassment. I did what I could, and with whatever policies were in place or weren't, I took action. It was heartbreaking, and it changed everything. I could no longer ignore the structural gaps even in spaces I helped create. I had always promised to build a safe platform for young women, but I came to understand that intentions alone are not enough. To truly protect them, we need the right systems in place: clear policies, safeguarding mechanisms, accountability frameworks. Because safety isn't just a value, it's an infrastructure. Sexual harassment is a structural barrier, blocking progress on SDG 5, SDG 8, SDG 16, and beyond. I've personally felt the urgency of this issue in ways I never expected. It remains one of the most underreported and under-addressed violations, especially in informal sectors where so many young people begin their career. While cultural, creative, and leadership platforms offer potential for empowerment, they can also expose women and youth to harassment, silencing, and impunity. According to a global survey by ILO, more than 1 in 5 people worldwide have experienced violence or harassment at work. That's why today's discussion is grounded in ILO Convention 190, a groundbreaking international standard that expands the definition of the world of work to include all workers, regardless of contract or job title. But only a small number of countries have ratified it. So today we are here to call on governments to ratify and implement C190, especially to cover informal and unregulated sectors, urge private institutions to embed safeguarding policies because youth energy must be protected, not exploited, and ask UN bodies to extend protection from sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment, PSCAH frameworks beyond humanitarian work into cultural, creative, and youth spaces. This conversation builds on what we began at CSW 69 during our event titled Beauty Will Save the World, where we celebrated the transformative power of women's and youth's leadership in achieving the SDGs. But today, we ask something even more urgent. Is the world safe for those trying to save it? We are gathered here at the United Nations to address something fundamental to achieving the SDGs, safety in the workplace. Sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, SEAH, remain widespread and deeply underreported, especially in informal or unregulated spaces where many young people begin their careers. The UN has acknowledged this change and taken action through zero tolerance policy and the PSEAH framework to move from reaction to prevention and accountability. But the real test lies in turning those policies into lived reality, especially for youth and women navigating informal or creative sectors where safeguards are often missing. On that note, Nepal is one country that is actively translating global commitments into ground-level action. And to share what that looks like in practice, I'm honored to introduce the recorded remarks of someone at the forefront of that work, Ms. Tej Dangol, the PSEA coordinator at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office in Nepal, who leads interagency efforts to strengthen protection, prevention, and survivor-centered responses. So let's hear from her now.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, Namaste and warm greetings from Nepal. I am deeply grateful to the IAYSP and the MGCY for organizing this crucial event on sexual harassment as a barrier to achieving the SDGs. I'm honored to be here today representing the United Nations Nepal. As the PSEA coordinator, I am excited to highlight our efforts to translate global commitment into local action. The UN has made significant strides in enforcing a zero-tolerance policy on sexual exploitation and abuse. Our experience in Nepal shows that real progress comes from operationalizing these policies through interagency coordinated efforts at the national level. We have built a robust system that unites the UN country team under a shared action plan aligned with national priorities. This includes joint reporting and referral mechanisms, collaborative SEA risk assessment, community outreach, mandatory training for all personnel, including common service staff, partner, and vendors. Interagency coordination and collaboration have proven to be powerful drivers of impact in our PSEA efforts. This enhanced efficiency, reduced duplication, and fostered a unified prevention, focused, and survivor-centered response. By working together, agencies shared resources, aligned strategies, and exchanged best practices. In my experience, PSA is a highly sensitive issue that demands thoughtful, respectful, and strategic engagement. Meaningful and lasting impact can only be achieved through strong collaboration. Addressing it effectively requires interpersonal skills, trust building, and the ability to unite allies and partners around a shared commitment. We are closely working with government bodies and other stakeholders to build national systems that are inclusive, resilient, and survivor-centered. Together, we have integrated PSEA into a national protection strategy, joint UN government plans, and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, ensuring that every development and humanitarian response focuses on a strong PSA commitment. I am proud to share in this platform that Nepal is among the first countries globally to embed PSA into the Development Cooperation Framework. We have embedded a dedicated PSA clause within the main document and incorporated PSA-specific language into the output indicators. These strategic interventions underscores our strong commitment to ensure that PSA is systematically mainstream across all UN-supported programs and initiatives in Nepal. One great example of our progress was in 2024, when we piloted the PSA integration into the UN government Joint Recovery Action Plan for the Jajarkot earthquake. We worked together under the One UN approach, enhanced the capacity of 18 partners and 13 local governments, and conducted massive awareness-raising campaigns in communities. As a result, 80% of people said they know where to report SEA cases. It was a strong, successful effort with real impact on the ground. Engaging with government on PSEA can be challenging. but Nepal has made steady progress through ongoing collaboration. We have conducted several orientations, trainings, and workshops for government officials, aligning content with national laws and policies related to PSEA. Earlier this month, we held a half-day workshop in close coordination with National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority and Ministry of Women, Children, and Senior Citizens. It brought together 11 cluster lead ministers and co-lead agencies, and it helped ensure that PSEA is now seen as a key component of every cluster's action plan. Yet, despite this progress, gap remains. Although the UN in Nepal has established SEA reporting and responding mechanism at country level, the persistently low reporting rate remains a concern. This highlights a critical need to build greater trust in our system, foster a culture of accountability, and empower community to speak up. Many government and national systems still lack the policies, mechanisms, and resources to effectively address SEA, particularly in private, corporate, and informal sectors where risks are high and oversight is limited. Even with PSEA's mandatory status, insufficient funding is a major challenge. This directly impacts the ability to support PSEA focal points and interagency initiatives. So, we should act with urgency and unity to prevent sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. The UN donor and partners must prioritize dedicated funding for PSEA as a core accountability measures, strengthen national legislation and enforcement through joint system, invest in leadership and community-wide capacity building to foster accountability and speak-up cultures. Above all, ensure that survivors remain at the center of every response. Let us be clear, protecting people from sexual exploitation and abuse is not optional. It is moral imperative, a legal obligation, and a foundation of our legitimacy. PSEA is not a one-time effort. It requires ongoing commitment. Shifting mindset and organizational culture takes sustained advocacy to promote a respectful environment in both workplace and service setting. Together, we can build a system where dignity is upheld, trust is restored, and no one is left behind. Thank you.
Page Tangol for grounding us in what localized action looks like, showing how coordination, prevention, and survivor-centered approaches can be implemented at the national level. Thank you once again. Right. So we'll be moving forward with another recorded message. Our next speaker will be Manasa Pradhan. She's a lawyer and legal researcher from Nepal. In her recorded message, she outlines Nepal's legal progress on workplace harassment, what exists, what's missing, how ratifying C-190 could help close protection gaps, especially for informal workers and marginalized communities. So let's hear from Manasa Pradhan.
In March 2004, the Supreme Court of Nepal issued a landmark decision in Advocate Sharmila Parajuli et al. Versus HMG, ordering the government to formulate a separate law addressing sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, following this landmark decision, two studies in 2004 highlighted serious issues of sexual harassment and exploitation in dance clubs, nightclubs, and restaurants. These studies found that 52.5% of female workers in these venues were misled by human traffickers posing as employment brokers and were forced into these jobs. As a result, in 2009, the Supreme Court in Advocate Prakash Mani Sharma versus Ministry of Women recognized that protections for women should go beyond traditional or formal workplaces. 10 years after the 2004 ruling, the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Prevention Act 2015 was passed. It introduced a broader definition of the workplace, including both government and private businesses alike. It also addressed a range of inappropriate behaviors, including physical, psychological, sexual, or economic harm. However, the law only applied to the organized sector, leaving out those working in informal sector. The 2023 amendment to the law addressed some issues, including public schools, but still did not cover informal employment. Meanwhile, in Nepal's National Penal Code of 2018 took a stronger position. Section 224 makes sexual harassment a criminal offense, punishable up to 3 years in prison and a fine of Nepalese rupees 30,000. Now, despite these laws, sexual harassment, especially in workplaces or public spaces, rarely get reported in Nepal, showing serious issues with enforcement. Globally, young people, especially women and gender minorities, are vulnerable to sexual harassment, not only in traditional jobs, but also in informal, freelance or gig work. These spaces, which are often intended to empower youth, can become places of fear and exclusion. This reduces youth participation and undermines the broader goals of sustainable development. That's why international frameworks like ILO Convention 190 are so important. The convention applies to a wide range of workers, regardless of their contractual status, and redefines the workplace more broadly as the world of work. It protects formal employees, informal workers, interns, trainees, job seekers, and volunteers alike. Given the enforcement of Nepal's current laws is already very inconsistent, it is critical to expand on these legal protections to include both formal and informal workers under the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. The 2023 amendment made progress introducing support services like psychological counseling and prevention trainings for both employers and employees. Now, to build on the progress already made, Nepal should ratify the ILO Convention 190, which would create a binding obligation to protect a broader range of workers. This would strengthen domestic laws, better protect women and marginalized youth, and ensure that all workers, regardless of their job status, can work in a safe and dignified environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marisa, for that important legal lens and for reminding us that laws must evolve alongside the lived realities of workers, especially in informal sector. Both Ms. Dangol and Ms. Manasa are from Nepal, so due to the time difference, they were not able to join us live virtually, hence the recorded statement. So I really appreciate, I hope you guys are watching. But I really appreciate both of their contribution. So our keynote speaker, due to his participation in another engagement today, we did rearrange our schedule slightly. So he'll be joining us shortly at exactly 4 p.m. And that being said, I would like to move ahead with our panel discussion. So just a quick note on the format before we begin. Each of our speakers will have 5 minutes to share their insights. All statements, after the statements, we'll open the floor for question and answer. So we have participants in person and also participants watching us through Zoom. So Zoom participants are also welcome to put their questions in the chat box, and we'll be taking the questions right after the panel discussion. And we do have a timekeeper with us, our Secretary General Olga, she's over there. So each speaker has 5 minutes, and when it's around 4 minutes, Olga will be showing the paper with 4 written on it. Olga? So yes, perfect. And with that, we just got a message from the ambassador as well. He is on his way, but he will take another 7 minutes. So we will start with our panel discussion for now. Our very first speaker for the panel discussion is someone who represents a bold and rising generation of digital voices. Sophie Fergie had built her online presence or started her career at a very young age. By her early teens, she had built a powerful online presence with millions of followers across platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. But the real power of her platform lies in her willingness to challenge injustice and advocate for safer digital spaces. In the recent Netflix documentary, Bad Influence, The Dark Side of Kidfluencing, Sophie courageously shared the realities of exploitation, control, and trauma behind the influencer industry's polished image. Sophie, we are so honored to have you here today. I'd like to give the floor to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and everyone listening. My name is Sophie Fergie. I am 18 years old, and I did not want to speak tonight. I wanted to stay silent, because silence felt safer. Because sharing this story is painful. Because every word brings back memories I wish I could forget. But silence is what allowed this to happen in the first place. For most of my life, I have lived in the spotlight. At 10 years old, I became what the world calls now an influencer. Millions watched me grow up online. They saw the smiles, the videos, the curated content. But what they did not see, what I was never allowed to say, was the truth behind the camera. I was a child, and I was taken advantage of. I was made to work long hours. I was pressured to wear things that no child should. I was manipulated emotionally, and I was hurt by an adult I trusted, someone who used their power to exploit me while pretending to protect me. And I stayed silent, until I found the courage to speak up. Because silence protects the wrong people. Even after it ended, I did not feel safe. I still do not. To this day, I sleep with a knife beside my bed. Healing is not quick, and it is not quiet, but I refuse to stay silent. In 2022, I joined 10 other survivors in a lawsuit to expose this abuse. We did not do it for attention, we did not do it for money, we did it for the truth, for change. In 2024, we won. But no legal outcome can undo what was taken. So now I speak. I speak for every child who never got the chance, for the ones still living in fear, for the ones still waiting desperately for someone to listen. This platform is not my privilege. It is my responsibility. And I carry it for every child who never got to be heard. This is not just my story. This is a global failure. Sexual abuse is not a private mistake. It's a public crisis. It is a barrier to peace, to justice, to dignity. We cannot talk about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, not gender equality, not decent work, not justice, and strong institutions, while children are still being harmed in spaces they should feel the safest. That is why I am calling on every government and institution to adopt and enforce ILO Convention 190. Create real protections, not just in offices, but in digital spaces, on sets, in schools, and in every industry where children are vulnerable. This means passing laws that actually get enforced. It means applying policies to informal workspaces, creative industries, and online platforms. It means saying finally that every child's dignity matters more than any reputation. And to any child hearing this, if someone is hurting you, if you are scared, ashamed, or confused, you are not alone. What happened to you is not your fault. You did not cause it. You did not deserve it. And even if it feels like no one sees you, I do. If you are being hurt, speak up. Tell someone. And if they do not listen, tell someone else. Keep going until someone hears you. I promise you there are people who will believe you, who will fight for you, and who will never let what happened to you be the end of your story. I will be one of those people, and I will not stop. I will speak until our voices can no longer be ignored. I will shout if I have to, so the world can no longer pretend not to hear. I will speak for the children who cannot, and above all, I will listen. Let this be a moment the world finally listens. Thank you.
Wow. More power to you, Sophie. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for speaking. Your voice has inspired many already, and I'm sure from today's statement as well, it will inspire many more to come. Thank you once again. I'll come back to you. But now, we've already seen that these experiences don't exist in isolation. They are part of broader systemic patterns that demand policy-level responses and long-term commitment. Our next speaker has been instrumental in shaping that vision. Catherine Travers is a global expert in gender-based violence prevention and legal reform, with over 20 years of experience advancing safety and accountability across systems. She currently serves as a policy specialist on ending violence against women at UN Women. Catherine also has been an incredible supporter of this event from the very beginning. She was one of the first to meet me, to listen, and to remind me that yes, there are solutions. From frameworks like ILO Convention 190 to broader momentum of Beijing Plus 30, she helped guide the framing of today's discussion, including suggesting the title, Sexual Harassment as a Barrier to Achieving the SDGs. Today, Catherine will take us deeper into that conversation, exploring why C190 matters across both formal and informal sectors, and how we ensure that youth-led, creative, and unregulated industries are not left behind. Catherine, as someone working closely on these issues at UN Women, could you share what is currently being done to address sexual harassment and other forms of violence against women in the world of work, including how ILO Convention 190 fits into that picture, and importantly, how can others, especially youth, civil society, and private sectors get involved in advocating for real systemic change? The floor is yours, and before you start, I would like to also welcome our keynote speaker. I will be giving you the floor right after Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks. Let me start by just thanking both of you also for sharing your stories and for creating space for these important conversations. It really is people who have the courage to break the silence that allow us to change our focus from seeing something as being normalized and overlooked and shrouded in the shadows to really putting it in the spotlight as something that is unacceptable and that we cannot keep living with. Excellencies, distinguished guests, partners, allies, activists, agents of change, it's a real pleasure for me to be here with you all today, and congratulations on having such a full room for this important topic. Sexual harassment is something that affects women and girls in their daily lives in all different kinds of settings, from the places that they go to when they are traveling, in transportation, for example, in public spaces, in workplaces, and online. It's a global issue. It's not something happening in one community or one country or one workplace. It's really a global issue affecting women and girls everywhere. And we already heard the statistic before that more than 1 in 5 people experience violence and harassment at work. And women, in particular, are more likely to experience recurrent forms of harassment, and sexual harassment specifically. And it's not the same for every woman either. Those who face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination face higher rates of sexual harassment in the workplace settings, with less access to services and opportunities to be able to hold the perpetrators to account. Young women, for example, are twice as likely as young men to experience sexual harassment in the workplace. These are not isolated incidents either. These really occur around the world and in all different kinds of work environments. So if we look at journalists, for example, a UNESCO study recently found that 73% of women journalists experienced sexual harassment online, and the majority of that spilling into offline forms of harassment as well. So really it's important that we see this within a pattern of a continuum of violence across settings and spaces. When women are harassed at work, they're pushed out of opportunity, out of leadership, and too often also out of public life. Technology is only aggravating this harm. And there are enormous costs to this. It's estimated that up to 3.5% of global GDP is lost to workplace violence and harassment, and that number is huge. It's also estimated that by advancing gender equality across the public and private social spheres, $12 trillion could be added to global GDP in just a few years. We can't afford not to act. And it's important to know that there are many people taking action to address that. In 2019, the International Labour Organization, ILO, adopted the Violence and Harassment Convention number 190, what we'll call C190, that we've already been hearing quite a bit about today. And in doing so, that was really a statement by the global community that it's time to wake up, time to start taking action, and this is a pathway for us to do so. C190 is unique and also innovative in different ways. First, in its creation, this is something that was done in a participatory way. It was done with a broad coalition of powerful women and unions working together to articulate it, to close some of those gaps that existed in other forms of legislation. It articulated freedom from violence and harassment in the world of work as a right. And that was the first time that we saw the inclusion of sexual harassment and other forms of GBV in an international treaty. Its scope is also broad. It covers everyone in both formal and informal economies, in public and private sectors, including employees, job seekers, that means also people who are interviewing for jobs, trainees, people working irrespective of contractual status. That means also including people who are volunteering, for example, or doing internships, and those who are exercising their duties and the authority of the employer. It was also designed to be, to reflect the fast-changing nature of the world of work. So that meant that it was broader than what we had seen before. So this is how the informal sector was also reflected within this. So it goes beyond a physical workplace, which is what it had been in the past. It includes within it anything that is linked to the performance of duties. So that includes your route to and from work. It includes things like online activities and work meetings, and also social events that are linked to work, or conferences like where we find ourselves today. And so through, more recently, as many of you probably heard, we had the Beijing Plus 30 review. And so sexual harassment is still an area where we have many gaps, but where we have seen some progress, even in the last 5 years. And UN Women launched what we're calling an action agenda. And this is really meant to accelerate progress to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. Included within that is a call for a world for all women and girls, zero violence, online and offline. And we all have a role to play in making this vision a reality. We can ratify C190. NGOs can work with the public and private sectors to strengthen their capacities to address sexual harassment in the world of work. Unions can advocate and engage in collective bargaining for prevention and for stronger protection mechanisms and support for survivors. Workers can contribute to transforming harmful social and cultural norms that normalize sexual harassment. I encourage you all to keep raising your voices, to claiming your rights to a world free of sexual harassment in the world of work and other forms of violence against women. Thank you.
Freedom from violence and harassment is a right. As Catherine mentioned, thank you so much for your statement and for grounding us in structural realities and the possibilities of ILO Convention 190. We'll come back to you again, but for now, it is my greatest honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today. His Excellency Lok Bahadur Thapa is the permanent representative of Nepal to the United Nations, where he has been representing Nepal's voice on the global stage since 2023. In July 2024, he was elected Vice President of the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, for the 2025 session, and later this month, he will assume the presidency of ECOSOC, playing a pivotal role in shaping the global sustainable development agenda. Ambassador Thapa is a steadfast advocate for multilateralism, equity, and inclusive policymaking, with a deep commitment to the 2030 agenda and the principle of leaving no one behind. Whether advancing the rights of least developed countries or pushing for stronger global partnerships, His leadership reflects Nepal's strong legacy of peace, dialogue, and development. We are honored to welcome him here to share his reflection on how we can ensure dignity, safety, and inclusion are central to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Moderator Norma, and for these beautiful introductions. Distinguished panelists, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my apology, I'm a bit late because I had to deliver the remarks in other HLPF event. At the outset, I'm pleased to join today's discussion on a subject I think that goes to the very heart of our shared agenda, that is dignity, justice, and sustainable development. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the organizers, the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace and the Global Forum on Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent for this important initiative. At a moment when HLPF is undertaking an in-depth review of 5 goals, including Goal 5 on gender equality, placing sexual harassment at the heart of it could not be more timely and relevant. Friends, sexual harassment is not just an individual affliction, but a structural and systemic failure. It undermines the rights, it diminishes the potential, it derails careers, it fractures society, it silently corrodes our collective progress towards the sustainable development. It is a structural barrier to peace, participation, and progress. It must be dismantled. Around the world, women and youth continue to face violence, exploitations, and harassment, often in places where they should feel safest: workplaces, schools, homes, and public spaces. There are many drivers behind this social ill: power imbalances, patriarchal norms, cultural stigmas, weak enforcement, among others. It is quite distressing that, according to UN Women, an estimated 35% of women globally have experienced physical or sexual violence, with national figures ranging up to 70% in some countries. These numbers are not abstract. They are a direct barrier to achieving SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 8 on decent work, and SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And their ripple effects undermine progress across the 2030 agenda, from SDG 1 on ending poverty to SDG 4 on equality education, and SDG 10 on reducing inequalities. Distinguished participants, in Nepal, like in many developing countries, a significant proportion of the workforce is engaged in the informal economy. Out of the total employed population, almost 80% are informal employed. For women, this proportion is even higher. The vast majority are engaged in informal or non-standard forms of work. These include domestic workers, agricultural laborers, home-based producers, and small-scale traders. These sectors are vital to community well-being, yet often remain beyond the reach of comprehensive legal protection. Ensuring dignity, ensuring safety, and providing opportunity in these sectors is not only a matter of rights, but is also a matter of development. Our collective efforts must therefore extend to these unregulated spaces. Nepal remains deeply committed to promoting gender equality, social justice, and inclusive development. We have introduced national measures to address harassment in the workplace. and continue to strengthen institutional safeguards across sectors. The Sexual Harassment at Workplace Convention Act 2014 and Section 54 of the Military Penal Code 2017 criminalize a wide range of behaviors and mandate workplace safeguards. Civil society organizations in Nepal are also raising awareness and supporting survivors. Colleagues, as Nepal prepares to assume the presidency of COSAC later this month, as highlighted by moderator, we will be stressing social protection, decent work, and full realization of rights, aligning our priorities with the integrated method of SDGs, including education, health, poverty eradication, and inclusive institutions. Distinguished participants, today's gathering demonstrates the power of inclusive platform where youth, survivors, civil society, and member states come together in pursuit of our common goal. Let me conclude with some suggestions for the way forward. First, empowering women and girls is crucial. Empowerment is prevention, and empowerment shapes power dynamics. Investing in education, investing in leadership, and providing economic access and empowerment is quite critical. Second, we must strengthen data collection and disaggregated reporting on violence and harassment, particularly in informal work settings. Without reliable evidence-based insight, our policies risk missing those most issues. Third, we must foster cross-border collaborations, uniting governments, civil society, and relevant institutions to build inclusive whole-of-society responses that uphold dignity and eliminate harassment in every sphere of work. Fourth, technology has both opportunities and challenges when talking about sexual harassment. Yet, leveraging technology for prevention and reporting through the use of various apps and AI-driven monitoring and SMS alerts to support survivors and identify patterns early is quite important. We must make technology serve as a force for safety. Fifth, engaging the informal sector and cultural industries is important. We must extend protection to those in informal or creative work. Sixth, it is also incumbent upon us to strengthen regional and global partnerships, to harmonize legal frameworks, share innovation, and accelerate global norms and frameworks in the national context. Colleagues, ending sexual harassment is not just a legal obligation, it is a moral imperative that upholds dignity, equity, and justice for all. A safe space is not luxury, it is a right. If we are serious about leaving no one behind, then we cannot leave people behind in fear, not in the home, not in the workplace, not in the society. There can be no dignity without safety, no justice without accountability, and no sustainable development without equality. I thank you.
Dhanyavad. Thank you, Ambassador Papa. Your remarks affirm that if we are to leave no one behind, we must ensure that no one is left unsafe, whether in a field, an office, a garment factory, or behind a camera lens. Your emphasis on inclusive multilateralism and sustainable people-centered development gives this conversation the global and institutional weight it deserves. We are grateful for your presence and partnership today. Thank you so much. And before I forget, Catherine kindly also extended invitation for reception this evening. So everyone present here is invited. This reception is hosted by UN Women, ILO, ITUC exhibits at the exhibit space. ITUC exhibit space event at 6:30 p.m. I'll again announce this at the end, but We hope that you all will join us, and it is a great opportunity to keep the conversation going and connect with others committed to driving change. From global frameworks to individual impact, one thing is clear: our system must evolve to reflect the realities of today's workplaces, including those found in digital, creative, and youth-led spaces. Our next speaker brings us into that lived reality. Marina Roman is a social media producer and creative storyteller whose work spans visual media, advocacy, and lived experience. She has navigated public platforms both personally and professionally, experiencing firsthand how digital spaces can be both empowering and unregulated. Marina, as someone who has worked both behind and in front of camera, can you share how your personal experiences in the pageant world and digital media have shaped your understanding of harassment in informal or unregulated spaces? And how do you think platforms like social media can be used not just for self-expression, but as tools for advocacy, healing, and change? Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm truly honored to speak here. I come from the world of sports, performance, and media, spaces that can empower women, but also expose them to deep harm. But my experience taught me something different. During my time with Ballerinas of Cairo, we danced ballet in the streets of Cairo to reclaim public spaces through beauty and movement. Many expected us to face harassment, but surprisingly, I never did. The same thing happened during my participation in a national beauty pageant. People often assume beauty and public visibility automatically bring vulnerability. But again, that wasn't my experience. Why? Because I walked into both of those spaces already empowered by confidence I had built from a young age, from my family, my coaches, and my mentors. When a woman stands tall, sure of herself, unafraid to take up space, people feel it. It changes how they treat her. That's why I say empowered women are harder to approach in harmful ways. And that's my message today. Empower women, empower youth. When you do, everything else follows. Confidence protects, and then visibility becomes strength, not a risk. But unfortunately, that's not the reality for most women around the world. According to UN Women, 1 in 3 women globally experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Harassment in the workplace pushes women out of leadership, out of creative spaces, and out of the workforce entirely. I saw both sides of this reality, as one day I experienced harassment by a stranger just by walking in the street. And I remember the look in his eyes, like he believed I wouldn't do anything about it. But as a stubborn young woman, I accepted that silent challenge. I gathered information, documented the incident, reported it to my family and local authorities, and I confronted him directly. That moment changed me. It pushed me to create a video to raise awareness and empower other women and girls. That video gained over 180,000 views. And more importantly, it opened a conversation. Women and girls messaged me saying this happened to me too, and I didn't know how to talk or what to do about it until now. The truth is, confidence, courage, and dignity are not things we're born with. They are taught, they are built, and that's why empowerment must start early with youth. Because sexual harassment isn't just an isolated act, it casts a long shadow on career, mental health, and basic human rights. That's why achieving SDGs is impossible unless we address sexual harassment as a structural barrier, not just a personal one. We need more than policies. We need a cultural shift and sustained social and behavioral change. And beyond that, we must listen to survivor voices. Shame the aggressor, not the survivor, and empower youth before harm happens. Because when we create spaces where women can speak, feel safe, and take up spaces as themselves, not as copy of men, but as women, we don't just change their lives, we change society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina, for sharing your story with such clarity and strength. Your experiences remind us that behind every policy discussion there are real people navigating complex, often unsafe spaces, and the digital platforms, when used with purpose, can be a powerful tool for visibility and change. So thank you so much for using your platform as well for change. And as we widen the lens on today's conversation, it's essential to center the experiences of historically marginalized communities, those who often face multiple layers of discrimination at once, by gender, by descent, by occupation, by geography. Our next speaker brings exactly that perspective. Please welcome Alima Tal, a senior rights expert from the Gambia and the Regional Youth Coordinator for Africa at the Global Forum on Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent. Alima has been a bold voice for equity and justice across Africa, playing a pivotal role in the adoption of the African Commission's resolution on work and descent-based discrimination, a major step in challenging generational injustices. Alima, as someone working directly with youth from marginalized communities across the continent, how do issues like work and descent-based discrimination intersect with sexual harassment? And what role can youth advocacy play in dismantling these deeply embedded power structures, especially in informal or hidden spaces of exploitation? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and my fellow advocates, I am delighted to speak today as a young woman and a representative of communities discriminated on work and descent on the topic sexual harassment as a barrier to achieving the sustainable development goals. So, for women and girls in the communities that are discriminated on work and descent, sexual harassment is not only an isolated experience, it is rooted in generations of discrimination based on caste, descent, gender, age, and occupation. In these communities across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, young women are often relegated to the most undervalued and informal jobs: domestic work, street vending, waste picking, care work, and manual scavenging. These roles come with low pay, low visibility, and high exposure to abuse. Young women from communities discriminated based on work and descent are often faced with sexual harassment, not only from employers and co-workers, but also from public officials and even within their own communities. Their youth make them more vulnerable. Their descent or caste makes them more invisible. This is not just a personal injustice, it is a systematic development crisis. Sexual harassment erodes physical and mental health, which denies them, which is with SDGs 3, good health and well-being, which is one of the SDGs that are to be reviewed this year. So this is not just personal injustice, it is a systematic development crisis. sexual harassment, physical and mental health, denies women and girls full participation and protection, limits access to decent work, and ultimately undermines the fabric of peaceful and inclusive society, which is SDG 16. Let me be clear here. Without addressing sexual harassment, particularly against the most marginalized, the CDDWD, we will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But we are not just victims, we are also agents of change. Across the world, youths and women from CDWD communities are raising up. Example, advocates. In your questions, you ask how advocacy or youth advocacy leads to the uplifting of these communities. In my community, a set of advocates in Africa came together and then make sure to fight the causes of these communities. We brought the issues to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, where we successfully, we gained a milestone of a resolution that was passed by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, fighting for the human rights and the recognition of these communities. The resolutions urged the African state parties to recognize the existence of this form of discrimination, which affects youths mostly. So everyone has the right to work. We are also using international tools like the ILO Convention 190, which affirms everyone has the right to a world of work free from violence and harassment, including gender-based violence. This convention is a powerful instrument for our advocacy, but many of our countries still haven't ratified it. And even when they have, implementation often excludes the informal and domestic sector, where CDWD, meaning the communities that are discriminated on work and descent, youth and women work. So today, I call on member states, UN agencies and partners to act with urgency and intention to ratify and implement ILO Convention 190 with a focus on informal work and marginalized communities, meaning the communities that are discriminated on work and descent, to support youths and women led of grassroots movement who are working every day to prevent response to sexual harassment in the CDWD communities, to ensure intersectional, inclusive SDGs implementation that recognize how gender, age, descent, and economic status intersect and ensure no one is left behind, to create safe space and accountable spaces for communities discriminated based on work and descent, the youth, women, to participate in decision making, not as token voices, but as full and equal partners. In my conclusion, I remind all, sexual harassment is a barrier, but it is also a side of resistance. By centering those most affected, young people, women, and CDWD communities, we can dismantle a system of violence, inequality, and truly build a future where everyone can work, live, and thrive in dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Alima, for powerfully highlighting how discrimination based on work and descent plays out across Africa, and also highlighting SDG 3, good health and well-being. It also affects SDG 3 and beyond, the SDGs that we presented, and how youth are rising to challenge these systemic injustices. Thank you again for sharing your story. Continuing, all right? You will Now, continuing on that thread, I am honored to welcome Naveen Gautam, a senior legal researcher at the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent, and also the Global Focal Point for Work and Descent-Based Discrimination at the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. Naveen has worked extensively on international human rights research focused on Dalit and descent communities, while also helping to build the capacity of young girls, young rights advocates around the world. So the question that was put forward to Naveen is not here in person, but he has graciously made a video just 1 hour before the event and sent it to us. So the question that was put forward to Naveen was, how does descent-based discrimination heighten the risks of sexual harassment for marginalized communities, and what legal and advocacy strategies are most effective in addressing this layered vulnerability, especially for young people in informal sectors. Let's have a look at Naveen's message.
Thank you, Nagma, for giving me this space, and I'm sorry I was not able to be physically present in this conversation, but I still remember the moment we started discussing about this conceptualizing and how powerful this session would be, and I'm sure you're having a great discussion during this. So I think as we already are having a good discussion on sexual harassment, so we also need to see how this is mostly impacting the women from the communities which are marginalized, the most historically marginalized communities, especially the communities discriminated on work and descent. And I think as we already had a discussion where Alima had kind of introduced about what are these communities and how caste-based discrimination, descent-based discrimination impacts the communities. And this is something which is deeply entrenched around structural inequality, significantly based on the descent, birth, and inheritance status, where the whole notion of purity and pollution comes in. And when it's about a sexual harassment against a women from a descent community itself, then there are various structures, structural barriers, various structural challenges which come in, and that's the reason why I need to kind of more and more talk about. And the most important one is about the power asymmetry and silences, which kind of sometimes places these women at the bottom of the social and economic hierarchies. Even if similar instances kind of occur, then a woman have to think twice that can it be resolved? Should I actually complain against this thing? How do we need to look at it, and how this has come up as a major labor rights issue? And I mean, look at the various aspects, especially in the informal sectors, be it the sanitation workers, domestic workers, street vending aspects, as well as the agricultural laborers, and also to some extent the whole aspect of bonded labor comes in, how women are impacted due to this. Social stigma and internalized disempowerment is one part where women from the communities actually grow under social conditioning that kind of to some extent normalizes casteist and patriarchal behavior, and that also pushes them back to come out and respond to that, of course, because of the whole insecurity which the society has provided to them, and that also leads to the self-censorship altogether, instead of raising their voices against these issues. Inaccessibility of the legal mechanism is one part which is very important we need to talk, because we have legal mechanisms, especially in India, especially in Asia, but if you go on the ground, if you look at them, they will say, okay, we have this law, but what will happen if we kind of address or try to use this law? So not only at the stage of having a law, but also at the stage of implementation, and awareness is one part which is major reason for this, especially for the communities discriminated on working decent, be it the Dalits, women in India, be the Roma women in Europe, or Haratin or Kilambula women, other parts as well. And of course, why ILO Convention 190 matters at this point of time, especially for these communities, because every time we talk about international law, also for the marginalized communities as well, but we also need to see whether these kind of protections do extend to the informal sector women as well. That is one part we need to see. And I mean, not only informal, even in the formal sectors as well, the situation is very difficult for the women from this part. And I personally, being a man, I should not have been speaking on these issues because I'm not so much sensitive around this thing, but these are few structural and legal barriers which we need to kind of talk about more, and I'm sure we might have had a good discussion in this session altogether. Access to confidential and safe complaint system has been one major challenge, especially in India and Asia, which has not come up very strongly. And we keep talking about safe places, but what are these safe places is something we need to kind of talk more about when we talk about ILO Convention 190. Awareness is one aspect which I've already talked about, but I think we need to have more representation when we are talking about the policies and schemes, because a number of times we try to come up with laws and there is no one who's supposed to kind of guide them, represent them, and we come up with a law which is not even sensitive towards these communities. And there are various levels. Caste and descent based discrimination is not something which is some one form of discrimination. These are various levels wherein there is an intersectionality of gender, there is intersectionality of disability, and other aspects. And who faces the brunt is the women from the community also. So yeah, these are the few basic recommendations which we can see, but also we need to see how do we kind of ensure that ILO and these the convention 190 convention is part of the domestic individual laws and policies, and we as civil society organizations should kind of ensure that we get it done. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. He's also one of the co-sponsors of this event. Now, let's move on to our next speaker, and she is our last speaker in the panel, last but not the least. Ms. Merle Christina Berlan brings over 3 decades of experience in peace building, values-based education, and women's empowerment across 128 countries. She currently serves as the Vice President for Administration of the Women's Federation for World Peace International, WFWPI, and is also the Director of their UN offices in New York, Geneva, and Vienna. WFWPI is also the co-sponsor of today's event. Ms. Merle is a passionate advocate for moral leadership, strong families, and education that uplifts dignity, principles that are deeply connected to prevention. Ms. Merle, how can value-based education and the role of families contribute to creating safer environments for young people? And how do we ensure these values are passed on across generations, not just institutions? We are so honored to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Nagma, for that million-dollar question and age-old question. I have to think back and look around for the origins and where it starts, the root causes of this very heavy topic. My answer is this. We live in a world where you must study 12 years to become a doctor, 8 years to become a lawyer, yet you need only 15 minutes to get married and raise a child. We train young people for the marketplace, but not for marriage, parenting, or moral leadership. Is it any wonder our families are breaking, our girls are being harmed, and our nations are losing peace at the most personal level? If we want to prevent sexual harassment, restore dignity, and achieve the SDGs, then we must stop treating family as a private affair and start treating it as national infrastructure. Because no SDGs can be fulfilled if our sons are not taught respect and our daughters do not feel safe even in their own homes. If we are serious about preventing sexual harassment and building peaceful, resilient societies, then we must expand the definition of education beyond academic achievement or workforce readiness. Today, we celebrate nations that invest 12 to 20 years in preparing young people for STEM careers before granting them licenses to serve. But what about the institution that forms the very foundation of society, the institution that produces human beings, marriage and family? Across the globe, any couple can obtain a marriage license after just a few hours or even minutes of orientation. There is no mandatory curriculum for parenting, no moral or emotional preparedness required to raise the next generation of human beings. And yet we wonder why families are failing, why women and girls are unsafe, and why boys grow up emotionally unprepared for responsibility. In poor communities in the Philippines, we have witnessed, I myself personally witnessed firsthand the consequences of this imbalance. Young girls sexually assaulted not by strangers, but by family members whom they trusted, their relatives and neighbors, because their mothers, driven by poverty, are forced to leave home for weeks at a time to work in the big cities. These are not isolated incidents. They are fundamental systemic failures. At WFWPI, we invest in empowering families to become safe and healthy environment for women and girls, and protection begins with values. We focus on this education and advocacy to focuses on value-based education as a primary preventive strategy and the role of families as culture shapers for future generations. Sexual harassment stems from distorted family systems. Value-based education addresses this at the root. It teaches dignity, empathy, and moral responsibility not in theory, but through lived practice. WFWPI's Dignity of Women project works directly with youth, especially boys, to internalize respect for women and dismantle harmful norms. In the Philippines, throughout WFWP's national chapters around the world, our family education programs bring parents, teachers, and young people together to address respect, emotional intelligence, and open communication, making families active partners in prevention. For the role of families as culture shapers for future generation at WFWPI, we call the family the school of love. Long before institutions intervene, the family teaches children how to relate and communicate and love. When parents are empowered with the right tools, they raise children who are both morally grounded and emotionally intelligent. Our best practices include intergenerational dialogue circles where mothers, fathers, and children explore core values like integrity, empathy, and the dignity of women. These build protective environments that extend far beyond the home. Investing in training of parents as educators and institutional leaders to model moral leadership. Before a child learns to speak, they learn how to love and how to be loved. That lesson taught in the quiet intimacy of family life shapes the future of peace more powerfully than any law or policy. This is not about religious values. The notion of the family as the school of love is universal, multicultural values that must be cultivated. WFWPI's Family as the School of Love education programs integrate family building, nation building, and peace building as a blueprint to a sustainable world of peace where women and girls are safe and protected. And lastly, I would like to recommend these for collaboration. Governments must recognize this gap and act with urgency to achieve SDGs 3, 4, 5, 8, and 16. And we recommend the following: integrate holistic family building education into national curricula with the same seriousness and investment given to STEM education. Create certification programs in marriage preparation and parenting accessible to all couples before entering family life. Fund community-based family education centers as part of national development and women and girls protection strategies. And lastly, include families as central stakeholders in the whole of nation approach to violence prevention, peace building, and moral leadership. We cannot continue to invest in machines more than we invest in mothers. We cannot afford to train engineers for 20 years but expect parents to raise future citizens without any formal education. If we do not educate our young people in love, in responsibility, and in family life, we will continue to see the very fabric of our society unravel. The SDGs are not only about economics and economies. They are about people, and people are formed in families. Now is the time for governments to act, to invest in family building as a matter of national security, peace, and dignity. To truly achieve the SDGs, we must invest in the family as the first institution of peace. Value-based education is not peripheral. It is the transformational engine of dignity, safety, and justice. When girls know their worth and boys are taught to honor that worth, we raise a generation that will break the cycle of harm and build a future of peace. Thank you very much.
What a beautiful message, Ms. Marley. Thank you so much for that inspiring message and for reminding us that true prevention starts with values instilled in our families, nurtured through education, and sustained through community. Thank you once again. And with that, we come to the end of our speakers lineup, and I want to sincerely thank all our incredible panelists, Sophie, Catherine, Tej G, Marina, Manasa, Alima, Naveen, and Miss Murli for your courage, your expertise, and your commitment to reimagining safer spaces for all. And also our keynote speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Lok Bahadur Thapa, and it is his birthday today. Happy birthday, Ambassador! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday, dear Ambassador Lok! Happy birthday to you! Thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your presence again, Ambassador. Happy birthday once again.
Continue the conversation.
Thank you. So, once again, thank you so much, Ambassador, the Nepal Mission, for your support and your partnership. Across today's conversation, we've heard stories of personal resilience and systemic injustice, from unregulated online spaces to legal gaps, cultural stigma, and power imbalances that silence survivors. But we've also heard solutions grounded in policy, education, family, and most importantly, youth-led advocacy. The conversation doesn't end here. It is just the beginning, in fact. It's a part of a growing global call to action to center dignity, amplify underrepresented voices, and to push for change in the places that need it the most. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for questions and reflections. If you are here in person, feel free to raise your hands. I already see many hands. And briefly introduce yourself before asking your question. We are in a time crunch. We have exactly about 7 minutes with us. So I would like to request all the participants who have questions to keep it very short, 30 seconds to 45 seconds each. And I'll be taking in the questions for the panelists, maybe 5 to 6 questions. I'd also like to, or less than that. One question? Okay. 2 questions. And I would like the panelists to answer to those questions. So let's hear from, yes?
First. Hi, my name is Kisua. I'm originally from Ghana, but I live here. I specifically work in peace and security, but gender is my tool. That's what I use. So gender, peace and security, and youth, peace and security. I was meant to keep the peace until I realized the one I was benefiting. This was my story when I took my cousin to prison because he tried to catch me. He didn't, thank God, but he went to prison. And I still don't have my aunties talking to me because I did this. So if you're a woman here, it is up to you to fight for yourself before the system fights for you. I have a question to Ms. Catherine. Yes, I'm pretty worried we are talking about sexual harassment, and the tables we are sitting on is not gender sensitive. I'm very worried because all the tables are open, all the people sitting here are women, and we have to cross our legs to see through the people who will be coming for us. Please, let the system do better. Let us all do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next question.
Hello, my name is Isabella. I'm a paralegal, and I first want to begin by thanking the panel for sharing their stories and pioneering the work against sexual harassment. And I would like to add a little bit to the conversation concerning harassment in the workplace and the lack of legal safeguards that truly protect vulnerable women and girls. I unfortunately came into close contact with a young woman who was in the process of securing employer sponsorship for her visa. In the midst of this process, she was denied sponsorship after refusing the inappropriate advances of a superior. When she sought legal counsel, she was discouraged from pursuing the case due to the lack of concrete evidence. How should women collect evidence or advocate for themselves when they're being discouraged by larger companies and institutions?
Thank you so much. Can we take one question from online participant if there is any? And one more from in person. So we've already taken, okay. Maybe someone from here and then I'll come back here again. The gentleman over there with the hand raised the highest. Yes.
Can you speak out?
Yeah, sure.
Right. We've heard multiple people talked about, ma'am, you talked about how it needs to start from family. And we've also heard about power imbalances. Now, so my name is Adarsh from India. One section of society that we don't talk about is where women also discriminate women. Where women feel that the other woman is going to, obviously, women are discriminated at various fronts, but the front where, with the one which I'm talking about, there is the concept of casteism that still exists in many parts of the world, not just in India, where a woman from one section of society would not even sit with another woman of a lower section of society according to the strata that has been said, or where when a woman is sexually harassed and she goes and talks about it with her sister or her mother, and her elders tell her that if she will speak out, then the society will judge. So when women themselves demotivate their younger generations, what is the step towards that? Because something which we have heard time and again over the last 2 days, educating the educated is very easy. All of us understand what's right, what's wrong. However, educating the uneducated where awareness has not reached, where something which is right for us may be wrong, maybe it is wrong for them. So what can we do so that this concept that what is right for us and what is wrong for them, it changes and they also understand that they need to speak up. It is something they need to speak up.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. One more question, online question. Don't worry, we do have a reception at 6:30. You all are welcome there. We all are going to be there. All our panelists are going to be there as well. So you can continue asking your questions and sharing your ideas in that reception as well. Online question, and then we'll move to the answers.
There were a number of questions, but one of them is, what role can men and allies contribute to breaking down the systems that sustain sexual harassment? And the second one we've also noticed is that I think is also a good one, is how can governments ensure stronger implementation of anti-harassment laws?
Sure thing.
So that was a lot of questions there.
Thank you so much. Now we will be quickly moving towards the answer. The first question was directed towards Catherine. Catherine, would you like to answer to the question? And if there is anything that you want to answer, please proceed.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm not going to have the answers to all these questions. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're talking about transformation. We're talking about fundamentally transforming the way that we see one another, that we act with one another, and what respect and dignity mean. And change takes time, and it takes everyone. It is a shared responsibility. So we can, of course, see the role of each of the actors in the ecosystem. Of course, men and boys have an important role to play in this, but we all do. And at the end of the day, this is also about power and about shifting that power. And that also is something that you're going to feel that tension. You know, another thing we talk a lot about is the backlash, right? And I'm sure you've heard a lot of talk about that in the last few months, the last few years especially. Ahead of this year's CSW, 1 in 4 governments self-reported backlash in their own countries. These are huge numbers, and that's pushback against progress, right? So that resistance will take time, you know, and we have to be stronger than the forces that are pushing back against us. We have to keep pushing forward to make that change. So I don't have answers for anything or everything, you know, but I think spaces like this, where we reaffirm that this is an issue, that this is happening, that we see survivors, and that we create spaces for the voices, is really a critical step forward. Thanks.
And for the question, the message to women, I would also like to add message to women and youth. So maybe Sophie, would you be able to answer that?
Sure. I feel like when it comes to your question, a big part of it is, you know, speaking up. And I realize how you're saying, like, how are we supposed to speak up when these bigger people are diminishing it and pushing it down? What I have to say for that is that we have to keep speaking. Keep speaking up and keep using our voices until it's heard. Trust me, I know it's very difficult, and I have been silenced by lots of big people to not speak about my own personal experiences. But I don't have all the answers, but what I can say is I think that we need to get more government people involved and more higher people involved and show that this is a real crisis. It's not just something that we can look over or push under the rug. So just really speaking out and using your voice and keep the message going. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sophie. For the rest of the questions, where the gentleman asks about women also discriminate women, and also a message to men. Anyone from the panelists would like to answer to that question? Ms. Murley?
Thank you for that question. The thing with values-based approach to solving sexual harassment and discrimination is we have to look back and think of our paradigms and our values. Most of our values came from cultures that were instituted from thousands of years, and there are practices that are harmful, and in order to move forward, we need to have paradigm shift. And for values, we use universal values, not for one specific culture, but universal. What universal values are what was true from 10,000 years ago will be true today and 10,000 years from now. So value lives in the family. And so for women to women discrimination, that is happening, that's real. But if we understand that the world is one global family and the world is an extension of our family, then with love, love supersedes whatever laws and cultures. So it's really within the family that it starts. We have to shift our paradigm to loving and looking at everyone as an extension of our family so that we can get rid of these harmful practices, whether it's men or women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Murley. And with that, we come to the end of today's session. One more question? Olga, can you help me choose? Thank you.
Yes. Can we?
Could you please pass the mic?
She was holding the hand first.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priscilla, and I am a UN rep for Women's Federation for World Peace. I would like to say thank you for organizing this event. I want to give out a shout out to Miss Murley Barland too, because she really did a inspiring speech, and in reality, the truth is love is what makes a family, and when we do everything with love, that is what creates more peace. So, and also I want to make a reflection, and it's about the young speaker, Marina. I thought that the story was very, very powerful, that you shared your experience and that you advocate for the youth so that they don't face those same things that you had to face and you had to go through. And my question would be, what policy or what policies can we do in terms of as governments or as entities so that more youth are protected online, because it is a platform where it can be unregulated. So I just had that question. And another thing that I want to point out is that there should be more awareness about this topic, especially when it comes to concern people with conditions or disabilities, because they have double the risk of facing violence, any form of violence, whether it's sexual violence or any other form of violence, because oftentimes people with disabilities, they need to have more care. They need more assistance with certain tasks. So that's a topic that would be suggested to also include. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Priscilla. Thank you so much. Okay, the gentleman here?
No, somebody can answer the question.
Oh, sure. Shall we take one more question?
Yeah.
Because the gentleman here is ringing yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
30 seconds.
No statements.
Yeah, so I will go straight to the point. My question is, the topic today is sexual harassment as a barrier to achieving the SDGs. Is this sexual harassment against women to achieving the SDGs or against youth? Why didn't any male join as a panelist? And most of the discussions centered towards women. Women do face sexual harassment as well. So who speaks for us and who advocates for men? That's my question.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Thank you, Priscilla, as well for your question. So the questions revolved around policy and also men also face harassment. Anyone from the panel would like to answer to these questions? Policy, all right.
Thank you so much. I'm going to answer the question related to policy. As I've seen, actually society, organizations, and governments, all of them contribute and collaborate together in order to stop harassment and in order to empower women. And with that being said, I would say policies by itself are not enough. It requires action from different parties. As I said, from the government itself, it requires them to actually implement those policies. From organizations, it requires them to actually back up the victims. And for the society, it requires them to actually believe the victims and not blame them, and not to give the aggressor any sort of excuse for his actions. So that's basically what I wanted to say, because that's what happened in my situation. In my country, I'm Egyptian. We have, for example, movements that, for example, like Speak Up. And I was talking to an influencer here at the United States, and once she knew I was from Egypt, she has faced actually sexual harassment. And she told me that I was surprised that organizations like Speak Up from another continent is actually supporting her case as well. So the answer would be collaboration and contribution from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I did get a cue to end our session here. But for your question as well, we are talking about both men and women, gender minorities as well, marginalized people as well. So everyone is included in this. And the solution for this, one of the objectives is also to ratify the ILO C-190 Convention, which is a robust mechanism, and it touches each and every one. So we can continue this conversation once again at the opening reception organized by UN, Women, ILO, and IUTC. I'll just share where it is happening. So it's from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the curved wall by the Qatar Lounge, first floor at UNHQ. This is the opening reception of the exhibition on ending violence and harassment in the world of work. Register in advance if you want to attend. Is registration important? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. All our speakers, all the audience, thank you once again.